Welcome to this channel of real-life inspired, quiet relationship stories. What I'm about to share is a memory fragment I've never told anyone. Tonight, let me tell you one more story I remembered, quietly, in the dark. My name is Naomi, and there are stories I have never spoken aloud. Even now, years later, I remember the weight of cherry blossoms, falling like snow on stone paths in Kyoto, that ancient city, where tradition bends but never breaks, where secrets hide behind wooden lattice screens and paper doors. That spring, something inside me began to unravel. I had been watching life from behind glass for so long, editing manuscripts about other people's journeys while my own remained unwritten. The publishing house where I worked felt like a museum of other people's dreams, and I had become just another curator of stories I would never live. In April, when the cherry trees were shedding their brief glory, I was sent to Kyoto for a week-long literary conference. The old capital stretched before me like an open book written in a language I had forgotten how to read, all wooden temples, and narrow alleys that seemed to hold their breath. I stayed in a traditional inn in the eastern hills, where the wooden floors whispered secrets beneath my feet and the tatami mats held the scent of centuries. Outside my window, the philosopher's path curved like a question mark through gardens, where monks had once contemplated the nature of existence. I envied their certainty, their ability to find meaning in silence. The conference sessions blurred together, editors and writers discussing the future of storytelling, while I sat in the back, feeling like a ghost at my own life. During breaks, I would escape to small tea houses hidden among the bamboo groves, places where time moved differently, and the modern world felt like a distant dream. It was in one such place, near the Silver Pavilion, with its perfectly raked gravel gardens, that I first noticed her. She sat at a low table by the window, wearing a kimono the color of deep water, her movements precise as ceremony. There was something about her stillness that made the entire tea house feel like a temple. She ordered matcha with the quiet reverence of someone performing a ritual. Her attention focused on the view of the path, where tourists wandered like colorful fish in a dark stream. Sometimes she would sigh, the sound so soft, it seemed to blend with the whisper of bamboo outside. I found myself studying the way shadows fell across her face, the elegant line of her neck, the careful way she held her tea bowl, as if it contained something more precious than green powder and hot water. Rain beginning, gentle pattering. When the spring rain began, sudden and silver, I watched her glance toward the window with something that might have been relief. She had no umbrella, and neither did the careful composure she wore like armor. For 30 minutes, I debated with myself in the language of small courtesies and larger fears, until finally I approached her table. "The rain looks persistent," I said, offering my umbrella with the formality that still feels safer than genuine kindness. "Perhaps we might share the walk to the station?" She looked up then, and I saw something in her eyes that recognized something in mine, the particular loneliness of people who have learned to be alone in crowds. "Midori," she said, introducing herself with a bow that belonged to an older, more graceful world. She worked, she told me, in a traditional textile shop that had been serving Kyoto families for generations. Her hands, I noticed, were stained faintly with indigo and gold, the fingerprints of someone who spent her days with beautiful things that belonged to other people. We walked together through streets that shimmered with rain and reflection, two strangers sharing the peculiar safety of temporary connection. At Kyoto Station, we found ourselves in a coffee shop, the modern fluorescent lights harsh after the soft shadows of the traditional quarter. Over bitter coffee and sweet pastries, we began the careful dance of revelation that happens between people who recognize each other's damage. She spoke of her work with kimono and obi, the weight of tradition that felt both sacred and suffocating. Her marriage, she told me in the indirect way of people sharing dangerous truths, had become a formal arrangement, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath. Like a display kimono, she said, meant to be admired but never worn. I found myself telling her about my life in Tokyo, the publishing house, where I helped other people find their voices while losing my own, the apartment, where I lived alone with books that felt more real than most of my relationships. We spoke in the coded language of the disappointed, sharing stories that meant more than their words. As the rain continued beyond the windows, washing the ancient city clean, I realized we had been talking for hours. The coffee shop had emptied and filled again, the staff had changed shifts, and still, we sat there like two people who had found an unexpected shelter from storms we couldn't name. When we finally prepared to part, Midori paused at the station entrance. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a decision being made in real time. "If you would like, I could show you the Kyoto that tourists never see, the places where the city keeps its actual secrets." I should have said no. I should have returned to my conference, my careful schedule, my orderly life of helping other people tell stories while keeping my own locked away. Instead, I heard myself accepting, felt something inside me, saying yes to a possibility I couldn't yet name. Standing in the neon-lit station, watching her disappear into the crowd like a figure from an old print, I understood that something had shifted. The careful boundaries I had built around my life had developed cracks, and through those cracks, something dangerous and necessary was beginning to grow. The rain had stopped, but I could still feel its coolness on my skin, could still taste the green tea and bitter coffee, and the sweetness of a conversation that had lasted longer than wisdom would have allowed. Tomorrow, I would meet her again. Tomorrow, I would step off the safe path I had been walking and into whatever story was waiting to be written in the narrow streets and hidden gardens of a city that knew how to keep secrets. But tonight, I returned to my traditional inn, with its paper screens and tatami mats, carrying the memory of indigo-stained fingers and a voice that spoke in the spaces between words, knowing that something had begun that I was not prepared to finish. Whether it truly happened, or maybe it didn't, somehow, the telling makes that less important. If even a small part of this story stays with you, then I'm glad I chose to share it. If you feel like it, I'd be happy to have you back for another story, and if you enjoyed this quiet moment, please consider subscribing. Until next time, another quiet night.